Good evening, good people. Welcome to Biden's First 100 Days, brought to you by Politiscope. Hi, I'm Walter Powell, co-founder of Politiscope. And what Politiscope is a nonpartisan player profile app that breaks down and explains every bill a politician votes for or against in a layman's terms, taking all that convoluted information, consolidating to one platform where you can register to vote, donate to politicians, track the hottest election, call your politician off the app, look at their tweets, even register to vote. So really just making it that one-stop shop for all politics. We're excited to have everybody here. And with further ado, let's get this conversation on the road. Tiara, handing the mic over to you.
Thanks, Walt. Super excited to be here. I am Tiara Chesmar, and I am a diversity officer during the day, and I run strategic partnerships at Politiscope in the evening. I will be your moderator today, and first, I would like to start out the conversation with the fact that we have a little bit of unfortunate news. So with the busy schedules of politicians, Mayor Asia Brown unfortunately could not join us today, but we do have an amazing replacement, Mr. Jackson White, who is actually the other co-founder of Politiscope. He is the chief political contributor to the app, and we're super excited to have Jackson here with us tonight.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Like you said, a little last minute, but pretty much my job is to keep up with politics and make the app and the product as relatable and easy to follow as possible. So looking forward to, just having a great discussion with you guys tonight.
Thanks, Jay. Our next panelist is Jame Beasley. Jame is a Georgia native who graduated from Kennesaw State University with a degree in African American Studies and Promotional Health. Jame currently continues her studies at Clark Atlanta, working on her doctorate of political science. Jame specializes in topics like women in politics, American government, as well as urban politics. Hey, Jame.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Our last and final panelist is Rob Allen. Rob spent the last 30 years in law enforcement as a retired chief of staff for the Hennepin County Sheriff's Department in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He's best known for his crucial planning and leadership behind the collapse of the 35W Bridge and the 2008 Republican National Convention. Rob is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Schools for Homeland Defense and Security's Master Program in Homeland Security. Rob, welcome.
Thank you, Tiara. Great to be here.
Of course. So let's not waste too much time, and I'd love to get this conversation started with the grand topic of Biden's first 100 days. So this first question is for all of you. What do you think are going to be some of the biggest challenges that Biden will face within his first 100 days? And what do you think he'll be able to accomplish outside of Trump's executive orders?
Well, I guess I can ring that off.
Yeah, Jay.
I think Biden is going to have some pretty decent success with his COVID response moving forward, especially with things like getting the Defense Production Act going, getting more masks out, setting more mandates for people to wear them on public transit, helping to get some stimulus to people, things like that. I think that the country is fatigued with the situation, as well as pretty much everybody just wants things to get better. So I think that he's going to have a lot of cooperation across the aisle from Republicans on a lot of that relief and response, as well as no real pushback from the public. Where I do think he's going to have some issues, though, is just his general policy agenda. And, moving forward, like, the Democrats, they have the Senate, they have the House. However, the filibuster is still in place. And you better believe that Republicans are going to be utilizing that. I mean, as long as it's in place, Republicans and Democrats are going to utilize it. So that's going to be something that we're going to see a lot of discussion around, because with the filibuster, it's no longer 50-50. You need that 60-40. And so that makes it a lot more difficult. And, I think also, just to close it off, one of the things we've seen within the Democratic Party for decades now is a lot of leaning into Republicans and what they want, and not really being an effective resistance, so to say, against that corporate wing of the political establishment.
Yeah.
And so, now we're going to have to see, well, is Biden going to be different than he's been? Because people aren't particularly expecting him to fight very hard. So we're going to see what's he going to do. So that's kind of what the playing field is looking like.
Absolutely. And Jamie, Rob, do you have any take on this that you want to chime in?
I agree with Jackson. I just want to also point out that these things take time. When Biden and Kamala Harris took office, if you listen to any kind of commentary about, what to expect, like it's almost like immediately they expect for both Biden and Harris to move heaven and earth to make sure that all the ills, particularly of like COVID and the economy, are corrected. I want to point out that things like it's almost like the United States was a sinking ship. And the Biden-Harris administration have to do, basic level things that we think that, the government or the federal government at least is already doing. A lot of those things were not getting done. National security briefings were not getting done. Press conferences were not getting done. So there's a lot of ground to make up. I would push to just say that Biden's biggest success perhaps would be in the COVID arena, but I seriously think that the rest of his administration is going to be dealing with things that are like backlog that we thought were happening, but they're not. We have a serious national security breach and issues that are not being centered, particularly in the national news, and that has to be dealt with. And it takes time. So I think that we have to be reasonable when it comes to like what to expect during these 4 years. I'm gonna stop there because then I'll start getting into it.
And I would just say that I think one of the things that President Biden needs to do in his first 100 days is encourage the nation to take a deep breath and stop some of this incredible divisiveness that has led to unprecedented violence. And I think you have to address the issues that the security failures that led to the events of January 6th. I think you have to prosecute people who participated in violent attacks on our federal government. But I think you have to do that without making it seem like political vindictiveness. I think you have to do it saying, look, this is the law is the law. This is how we operate in this country. And I think it's a challenge. And I think in terms of policy issues, that may mean for a little while, you kind of hold the reins back a little bit and say that it's possible to disagree on policy matters without hoping that the other side fails. That just because you're trying to get a policy through doesn't mean that that's a failure for the other side. And so I think that sort of balance of success for your side without causing failure to the other side is going to be one of the key challenges in that first 100 days.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you brought up the topics, the topic for the attacks at the Capitol. My next question to pose for you guys is, how do you think those attacks at the Capitol will challenge Biden's agenda and his path moving forward?
Well, I think that one of the bigger challenges actually, it'll definitely come into play with Biden's administration. But I think that really the insurrection at the Capitol is more so challenging the Republican Party than it is the Biden administration, from a sense of the growing divide of what direction is the party going to take. And that is going to therefore affect how Biden is going to work with the Republican Party or not. Looking at senators like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, who are facing a lot of scrutiny right now for stepping in and kind of being a part of that movement. I don't remember exactly the amount, but dozens, I think over 100 Republicans in the House stepped up to contest the elections as well. Yeah. So really that balance within the Republican Party, I think, is going to impact, Biden's reaching across the aisle. Who is he reaching across the aisle to? And what exactly are the Republicans going to do to get their act together moving forward for 2022, for 2024, and so on? So I think this gives the Democrats and Biden a lot of leverage just to look like the big, the bigger kids in the room, the adults in the room. However, he's going to have to use that to, as Rob pointed out, to really bring the nation together and to not keep going in that direction. So he's got a really big job on his plate.
Yeah, for sure. Anything to add there?
I would just say that I think that he made a step in absolutely condemning the activities that happened at the Capitol. I think that is just a step, right? Because there were a lot of Republicans that were just like, oh, these are fine people and like we love them, right? And we, everything is fine and this is, fine. This is their American right to storm, the Capitol. I think that's a step. But I think what Jackson said really is it's up to the Republican Party. Or how much longer are you going to center these fringe groups in your party? Because now the Republican Party looks just white supremacist. There's no way to flip that, turn it another way. That's what they're representing right now. So the Republican Party has to decide, what are we going to continue to center these people? And they also have to think about how do we pry these people away from the political apparatus to begin with, right? So we have people that cling to conspiracy theories that are in elected office now. Is this the road, that you're going to continue to go down, where you have, again, these fringe groups that are very connected to the American political apparatus? Are you going to stand, next to that? So Republicans have a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of work has to be done on looking at that January 6th, those events. It's striking to see the response to the Black Lives Matters protest and how that was confronted by law enforcement versus how this rally, where the intel was there. The FBI had warned the Capitol Police. They had warned people that there was the risk of serious violence, and yet the response was horrid. It really one of the biggest embarrassments in law enforcement history. And why did that occur? And I'm not sure whether that falls to the responsibility of the Biden administration or to the Congress itself. I mean, they run the Capitol Police. The Capitol Police respond to Congress and not to the executive branch. But the national security implications of that event really need to be addressed, and I think it's going to be a challenge moving forward.
Absolutely. So I wanted to get on this topic because we were talking about how there's so much political polarization right now, but Biden is, stressing unity in almost every one of his speech. He stresses unity. See the diversity in his cabinet. He just appointed Cedric Richmond as his senior advisor. You see brown, black, you see transgender. He signed that order that took the ban off of transgenders in the military recently. What do you think? Do you think this approach is going to be helpful in his goals, or do you think it's deterring a lot of America because they have a different agenda in mind?
Well, I think that one thing that's important for people to understand, and one thing that my biggest criticism personally of Biden, along with the Democratic Party, is there's a difference between reaching across the aisle in America for the types of policies that people are on board with that can bring people together, that can give our children better education, that can give us better access to social aid, better jobs, better wages, things like that most people are pretty much on board with. And reaching across the aisle politically to a political establishment who's funded by corporations and special interest. Both of these establishments, the Democratic and the Republican parties, primarily are funded by the same organizations and the same people. And so reaching across the aisle really doesn't mean very much, because at the end of the day, if wages aren't growing while the cost of living continues to go up, while jobs get shipped overseas, while the military activity keeps getting increased, so on and so on and so on, that's really been the result of reaching across the aisle. It's been screwing the middle class and shrinking the middle class in a variety of different ways. And so, again, for me, it's not that meaningful unless you're talking about reaching across the aisle in America. How are we going to bring Americans together under the same types of principles and policies that can help everybody, instead of how can I reach out to Mitch McConnell and what does Joe Manchin of West Virginia who cares? You know what I'm saying? Like like people like that, like who really are just there to protect special interest. So that's kind of my overall view of it. And I think one thing that a lot of people don't really understand is, who are we talking about reaching across the aisle with?
Mm-hmm. And we also, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, I think one of the challenges is that, look, 15% of the people on the right are crazy. They're white supremacists, and we'll never get them into a place of unity. 15% of the people on the left are crazy and radical, and maybe the numbers are wrong. It might not be 15, but the key is, I think we have to focus on the people who we can really impact. And there's been a lot of license to, I think, on both sides to cast the other side as far left and far right, instead of, I think, 70% of Americans, give or take, agree on 90% of the issues. And if we can focus on some of those, we can make progress in those areas on things like livable wage. President Biden today signed an executive order, Made in America Act, which I think will actually have far more impact. President Trump signed essentially the same executive order in 2017, but never really followed through with it. But President Biden's executive order actually has some specifics in there that will try and bring economic advantage to American manufacturing and so forth. So I think the key is to focus on getting at least, we're going to have policy disagreements depending on which side of the aisle you're on, but let's at least agree that we want to move forward as a nation.
Mm-hmm. And we touched on, the diversity. We really honed in on the ethnically diverse, but what about having Kamala Harris, who is ethnically diverse and a woman? How much do you expect Kamala to be in front of Biden? And do you think that'll mess with his credibility a bit, or do you think it'll be a home run?
Well, given that the Senate majority is hangs literally right on the balance, I think she's going to be spending a lot of time as president of the Senate voting tie votes. And so I think she's going to be very busy in the Senate for at least the next 2 years. But I think there's an opportunity that's not to be missed there in what she brings to the office. And I hope that, unlike the past vice presidents, the President Biden uses her and puts her out there and puts her forward on issues.
Yeah. Jackson, Jamie, any thoughts there?
I think Kamala Harris absolutely is going to set herself up to run for 2024. With that, I think that she is going to be front and center in a lot of, I don't want to say in a lot of issues, but she's going to be front and center. I think Kamala Harris, while we may have qualms about her identity and her and what she identifies as, she's competent, which I think people, I don't know, I guess the last 5 years, people are just used to people not being competent in politics. I want to point out that elected officials, while they have a say sometimes in legislation, that it is state legislatures that write laws and policies of states. So when you say things like Kamala Harris locks people up, that is absolutely the doing of state legislatures and not Kamala Harris herself. So if we're going to talk about competency, and this is why I think Trump leaving office, we can get back to talking about governance and competency, because we have national news cycles that don't talk about the role that state legislatures play in these laws and procedures that each individual state can draft themselves, right? So we can pass wide swiping analysis about federal policy, but the fact of the matter is state legislatures carry out how these wide swiped policies are carried out. And a lot of these state legislatures go unopposed for decades, right? So I think we can have now robust conversation about governance and really understand how we exist in a federalist system, right? So it's a 3-tiered government system. So we can now have these again robust conversations and analysis of how these things work. So I hope that Kamala Harris is absolutely centered. She's competent. She's a leader. Baby girl, was a prosecutor. She knows her stuff, right? It has been for some time. So I want to give Kamala Harris her flowers now. So yeah.
Thank you, Jamie. And I'm so grateful that you brought up, the effects that state and local governments have on your day-to-day life. It's something that Politiscope is 1,000% behind. It's something that we're trying to teach in our app. And with that, I hope a lot of younger folks are tuning in today. So this question is for the students. Biden wants to forgive $10,000 in student loan debt. This is, a small percentage for folks' total debt, especially me, who's probably over 100,000. But do you think this will be much help, and should Biden aim for more than just 10K?
Yes, I think he should aim for more than 10K.
Absolutely.
I think he should, because why not? You know what I mean? Like, 10K is better than nothing, but it's kind of like taking a bucket out of a pool. You know what I mean? Like, are you really gonna feel it? Probably not. You know what I mean? Especially like, for people who, really went, as you were saying, really went far in their education, masters and on, $100,000+ in debt.
Like Jamie.
Right, exactly. About to be a PhD. $100,000+ in debt. And this is an issue. That's just one area where Americans are neck deep in debt.
Yeah.
So if we're going to tackle this, I personally think we really, really should tackle it, because when you're talking about the economy and you want to make it better, a lot of that is people having money to spend.
Yep.
And that's not been the direction that we've been moving in for quite some time. It's been, the small percentage of people hoarding all the resources that don't trickle down because they never were going to. Yeah. So, I think that I think it's a start. And one thing I'm happy about as well, I think, happy or not, I think what's important in politics is how you can push people, how you can influence them. And I think that just with everything that's going on, the dire straits that our economy is in, and Biden and Harris coming in after such a historically chaotic presidency, I think that there's a lot of room to push Biden and Harris into directions that will really benefit everyone.
I agree. So student debt, Rob, you have something?
I was just going to say, I think the question's going to arise: how are we going to pay for this? And the reality is, there's an opportunity for education here, which is look at the deficit created by each of the past 5 political administrations. And the myth about the Democratic Party is that they're tax and spend, and that the Democratic administrations raise the federal deficit every time they're in office. And that's a myth. That's actually untrue. There has never been a presidential administration that has raised the deficit more than the past 4 years. And so I think there's an opportunity to educate people about federal spending there, and to point out, as Jackson said very eloquently, that there's actually an economic benefit to the country as a whole to erase some of that debt by making people more productive and better educated, and getting people, instead of spending money on paying off student loans, they're paying money into the economy, which spurs economic growth and is better for all of us. Absolutely.
So this is obviously a hot topic. Another very, very hot topic in our nation is the coronavirus. So when Mayor H. Brown was going to join us, I was going to highlight that LA County just hit 1 million cases. So what do you think of Biden's plan to administer 100 million vaccination in the first 100 days, along with encouraging folks to wear a mask for 100 days?
I think that we have made, like, the fact that the last administration has silenced science for the duration of this, pandemic, is very troubling. Dr. Fauci being able to speak on something that he has studied his entire life, right? These scientists who have dedicated their lives to studying science, right, can now speak, and they can now speak on their research. I think that is a step in getting people to, because you also like they just don't want to get vaccinated because they don't trust it, right? I think we're dealing with like a bunch of different things at one time. So now that we have Dr. Fauci and these scientists that are able to speak on what they know and what they have researched, I think that it's moving people in more of a direction to want to get vaccinated. And I think that his plan is, I think that he can get his plan done. Again, it's going to take the cooperation of the states and localities to do that, right? So I think that his plan, I mean, it's ambitious, but I definitely think that he'll get his plan done.
Thanks, Jamie. Anyone else want to chime in there?
I think the challenge, and Jamie alluded to it, I think the challenge is that while overall direction and best practices are perhaps named by the federal government, we have to rely on the states to actually carry out the strategies. And the states' responses have been very varied, to say the least, right? Some states have taken mask mandates very seriously. Some have said, it's a personal choice. And as a result, I think we've seen sort of this, we don't have a consistent national strategy. And because the states actually enforce the rules and implement the strategies, the results have been sort of chaotic.
Absolutely. And Jamie, you and I had this conversation offline, saying that I live in Florida and you live in Georgia, where the rules are not that strict and people are out partying and having a great time. Not taking it very seriously. Not a joking matter, but it's hard not to look at it and shrug a little bit. Jamie, this question is actually specifically for you, seeing that you're a subject matter expert on speaking about Congress and you're almost doctor status.
Yes.
With the Democrats taking the Senate, how do you think the Republicans will push back against Biden's agenda, and how should the Democrats prepare for this?
I will zero in specifically on disenfranchisement at the gate of Black and brown communities. I'll speak on Georgia politics because I live here and I'm following it very closely. So we know that the Black community, Black and brown community, were responsible for putting Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff in office. We were also responsible for flipping Georgia blue. I put quotations because our state legislature is still very deep red. So we're not all the way blue, right? I think that the Democrats, ask your question again. I gave too much context. I'm sorry.
No problem. With the Democrats taking the Senate, how will the Republicans push back on Biden's agenda, and how should the Democrats respond to this?
Okay, yeah. So they're going to take it one state at a time with this enfranchisement. So here in Georgia, they are proposing to change the Georgia state constitution, that the Secretary of State is appointed by the governor instead of an elected official. This is a state constituted office that it is supposed to be an elected position. And so when you start to closely align any kind of elected office with a party in such where it's an appointed position, you then begin to pass legislation that prohibits certain people from voting. And so because largely Black populations have been responsible for flipping states blue or flipping state, legislators blue, they're going to start chipping away at voting rights in various ways. So I think we have to, so state and local politics matter. I will die on this hill. We like to get caught up again in, this federal conversation, but what your state elected officials are doing and your, city council members are doing are absolutely important to the wider stage. And so it's a constant, I don't know, I don't want to say a constant struggle, but we have to pay attention to these things, because when 4 years come up and all of a sudden we need all of these various documents to vote, then we're like, well, what happened? Well, you're not paying attention on the state and local level, right? So I would say their first thing is to keep it tight on the voting on voting laws, right? In your respective state. So
So a quick commercial: stay engaged, be informed, download the Politiscope app.
Yes.
Rob, did you have anything to add there?
I don't. I think Jamie said it very well.
She hit the nail on the head for sure. So I do have a question geared towards you, Rob, next. So you're an ex-cop. You spent 30 years in law enforcement. You're also a gay man. So I'm sure that was an interesting role to play in a very machismo environment. Biden plans to create a National Police Oversight Commission in his first 100 days. Do you think that'll have any impact in tackling police brutality and increasing accountability?
I think in the long term, it will. I think there is opportunity there. And it's interesting, during the President Obama's administration, he created the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. Mm-hmm. Charles Ramsey, who's the former police chief of Philadelphia and DC Metro Police, and really one of the great minds in policing, was one of the chairs of that. And Lori Robinson, who's one of the great academics in law enforcement, the study of law enforcement, were the co-chairs of it. And they came up with, I think, 9 recommendations that were very strong. Mm-hmm. The challenge is that it sort of fizzled. Part of it was the succeeding administration wasn't terribly interested in implementing any of the strategies. But the other challenge is that the federal government really has very little say over policing. They have 2 things. They have a stick, which is they can come in and do civil rights investigations in cities which have very egregious violations of civil rights things. And that takes a long time. They've had some success with it, and I think it's an important stick to have. The other thing they have is a carrot, and that is in terms of grant money and offering grants to change and to adopt more professional policies. And I think that's the one area where the federal government has to step up and say, look, you've got to change police culture. Here's some grant money to do it. And that's what the federal government can do. I think for people who are concerned about police brutality, and you should be, wherever you are in this country, then the action needs to happen at the state and local level, because those are the folks who empower the police agencies. They're the people who license police officers, who deputize them or swear them in or authorize them to be police officers. And if we're not revoking the licenses of those folks who are operating in a way which is inconsistent with American values and inconsistent with the values of the community they serve, then they're not doing their jobs. And that's where people need to get involved.
Absolutely.
Moving forward.
I mean, if you take away anything from this conversation, I think we've honed in. Be engaged at the state and local level. Be informed, get engaged. Jamie, I know you had a few opinions on this. Is there anything that you want to chime in before I go to the next question?
I think Mr. Rob did a beautiful job. I was waiting to hear that policing is a state and local function, because I think that gets convoluted. It's all, yes, that's what I was waiting for. So nope.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up this panel portion with one more question, and then we're gonna go from get some questions from our audience. So the Democrats are planning to roll out a stimulus package worth $1.9 trillion within the first 100 days. Do you think Biden will be able to garner support across the aisle successfully to pass this out through Senate? I mean, unemployment rates are record levels right now. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that, I have many thoughts on this. I think that, personally, I think that it would have been of better political capital for Biden to just come straight out the gate giving people $2,000 checks like he said he would.
Yeah.
Because most people aren't following politics really, really closely like we do who work in it. And so they heard $2,000 checks. Now you're talking about $1,400 checks because you already got the $600 checks, which a lot of people are still waiting on, including myself. Where's my $600? You know what I'm saying? But you feel me? Like it's just in terms of the optics, and then, like, for instance, he's put in like $15 minimum wage in this package. He's tackling immigration in this package, which, depending on your views, is great. However, you're putting a lot of things on the table that don't really necessarily address the immediate issue. And so if he, the problems that he'll face will be in those areas, like, well, what $15 minimum wage, what does that have to do with what people need right now? So there's going to be a lot of argument around that. So, if I was his advisor, I would have just been like, bruh, just get these checks out to people and then deal with everything later. But I'm not. So, yeah.
Anyone else want to chime in there?
That was beautiful. I agree.
You agree. Rob, anything?
Nope. I think that it is. It's a no lose issue if it's done right. And I think I think the challenge is convincing people that the money isn't really a problem, and people need to understand federal budgeting better.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes our panel portion. I do want to ask that you leave our audience before we go to Q&A with one nugget of advice, whether it be political, something from your career journey or your collegiate journey, whatever you want to give our audience you feel would suit them well, please be my guest. And Jackson, I'm going to start it off with you.
Well, I think one thing that I've really learned in my almost 29 years of life is, real things really do take time. And if you want to make a difference of any kind, whether that be in business, as an entrepreneur, in politics, in someone's life, whatever that may be, you got to stick with things. And it's worth it to stick with it, because you think you're all ready when you first get going, and you're not. You know what I'm saying? And you learn so much along the way that really, I think, makes life and the process of whatever it is that you're striving for worth it. So I would just say, stay patient, stay with it, and let the disappointments and the failures make you stronger, because they will if you keep on going forward.
I love that, Jackson.
That was
great advice. Yeah. Rob, let's turn it over to you.
So I think one of the things, we talked about engagement and understanding government more. And again, kudos to the Politiscope app for being a really easy way to start understanding politics. And if you want change, you really have to understand where you need to get that change from. And so I think that's part of it. The other thing I think people really need to be aware of is truth. Where do you find truth? There's so much stuff which is infotainment on TV news stations. You have to read for yourself and read a variety of news articles. And to me, one of the critical issues is the rise of hate groups and groups that are invested in perpetuating hate and perpetuating a false narrative about what's really going on. And one of the great resources for information on those hate groups is the Southern Poverty Law Center. And if you want to educate yourself on these hate groups and how they're using the media to what's the word I'm looking for, to create havoc, that's a great source, because they can show you kind of from start to finish how that hate propagates itself.
Jamie, what about you?
I'm gonna just make it quick. State and local politics matter. You need to absolutely follow these things. I taught state and local last semester, and I drilled it into the students' head. They impact your life on an everyday basis more than the news cycle that you see, about national news. Also, I would just say, in this life journey, stay true to yourself, and the money will come. Find things that you're really passionate about, and the money will come, because you'll be a lot happier in the long run. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Let's get some questions from the audience going. Let's bring up the first question, please. How can we govern and promote progressive policies and protect our majority in the House and Senate?
Just do it.
Ooh,
Just do it. Just do it. It's not that, it's really not complicated, because, and I can really speak to this as a progressive myself. You know, a lot of what that means to me is just push the ball forward. You know, are we really arguing about helping people? Are you serious? That needs to be the attitude that people have. Like, are you serious? What are we talking about right now? Of course we're going to give people more money. Of course we're going to stop letting these executives get away with robbing their employees. Of course we're going to do something about it. That's the attitude we need, because again, so much of what people want, as Rob said, 70% of the people are in agreement with 90% of the issues. It's the people, it's the special interests that don't want to give more health care to people, or don't want to reverse, you know, like things like corporate stock buybacks. That was once illegal. You know what I'm saying? That became legal in 1980. That wasn't a thing. You know, so like, there's so much attitude about, well, things are just the way they are. No, things were made to be the way they are. And I think that what matters is, whether you're progressive or conservative or whatever, part of the idea of America is to get in the fight. You know what I'm saying? And just believe in what you stand for and push it forward. Yeah. And so that's been my biggest criticism of the Democrats. Are you for the working class, or are you the lapdogs of the Republican Party? You know what I'm saying? So just go for it. Just push it.
Yeah, I think we're arguing here, you know, about some basic like human rights issue, right? So should people have health insurance? Well, duh, people should have health insurance. People should have clean water. Like, these are, so like when we say like what's that woman's name? Kelly Loeffler is like radical, you know, Warnock, right? Okay, the radical things that he's arguing for are healthcare, like access to clean water, you know, access to economic opportunities, right? So if this is radical, then like, you know, what's not radical? I think like we get caught up in the progressive, and like right here now during this pandemic, we're arguing about basic human rights issues, which is access to healthcare, access, you know, to clean water, access to food, access to housing. We're arguing about these basic things, and like what Jackson said, like these special interest groups do not want to let go of the power that they have. We have a whole generation of Americans that have been robbed of the American dream because they cannot purchase a house because they're tied to student loan debt and credit card debt.
Yes.
What are we doing? What are we doing? So like, I think it's yeah.
Yes, Jamie. Rob, anything to add before we go to the next one?
Yeah, I just think the real challenge is this. President Trump was elected because he doesn't like government. And there are a lot of people who kind of buy into this whole thing that government can't do anything well. He shut down the government, for arguably the Senate shut down the government. The government was shut down for 35 days. And as a result, you know, a lot of really excellent career people left government. And I think President Biden has an opportunity here because he has a deep and abiding faith in the power of government to accomplish good. And part of that is going to be educating people. Look, these are the really good things that government can do. And you're going to have to bring people along to at least understand that the government is essentially good. It's what makes us a civilized society. And you know, baby steps. We may not be able to accomplish everything all at once. It doesn't mean we don't fight for it. It doesn't mean we don't argue for it. But we have to bring people along to the point that they understand the basic good that government provides.
Thanks, Rob. Let's bring up the next question, please. Will Dems reinstate the tax penalty that was repealed by the Republicans as way to weaken Obamacare? That one's a hard one. Anyone want to take
that is pretty specific. If they can, they will. I know one. If they can, they will. I know one thing that Biden's pushing for is he's pushing a provision before that people's cut off to subsidies for the Affordable Care Act was, if I believe, individual 400% over the poverty line. So individuals who made like 51,000 and families of 106,000 were cut off from subsidies. They're pushing to make a change to where I think it's like basically that cutoff is gone to where people who are a little bit above that line can have access. So that could give several million people additional access to healthcare. So they are making moves that would, expand upon that. I don't know exactly about that tax credit, but wherever they can, they will. Specifically also because the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, is a very strong brand for the Democratic Party. And so however they can rescue the Affordable Care Act, they're going to do it because that's going to be their first move before anything else. So,
yeah, that was definitely a tough one. Let's go to our last question. And then after we get this one answered, I just want to encourage everybody to reach out to our panelists or the Politiscope team as they can answer some more questions for you if you have them. Their socials are at the bottom of their pictures. Let's go to the last question. Victoria is asking, do you all feel that his speculated student loan forgiveness will happen? Ooh.
The 10,000 or the?
I think she's referring to the 10K.
I think there's. What are you saying? Go ahead, Jamie.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I was just gonna say, if he, like I said, if we're really, serious about the meat and potatoes of this argument, it's economic opportunity, right? During a time of a pandemic, right? You have a large pop. If we're being honest, Black women are the most educated group of people in the United States, and therefore we have more debt than anybody else in the United States, right? You can go look that up. There's numbers to back that up. So if we're talking about economic opportunity, that's baseline starting. So I really would hope that if Biden is serious about, what he's, proposing, that $10,000 would be baseline. I think it would be monumental for them to pass that. I don't want to say feel. I would just speculate that if they're moving to or projecting to try to move us forward, that is something that Kamala Harris will pick up in 2024. I think that's like meat and potatoes. That's like, I don't want to say low hanging fruit, but that's one of the ways to see an economic surge, right? If we release some people from some student loan debt.
I actually have something to add to this as well. And it's something for you guys to think about and comment if you have anything to say. But what about the lingering effects of paying student loans? Like someone like me who pays, close to $1,000 a month in student loans, like that debilitates me from purchasing a home, from investing in different things. Like, what about those effects? Any thoughts there?
Well, it's those effects that keep everything in place the way that they are. You know what I'm saying? It keeps people immobile. It keeps people, well, more importantly, those are the side effects. But what we've seen from about 1980 until now is the steady movement of capital out of labor and into the stock market, and more of an emphasis into shareholders. You'll have people in executive positions who come in places and they may make a $3 million salary, and then when they leave, they get $40-50 million. You know what I'm saying? Because of what their stock options are. And what you have to think is the more emphasis that goes there, the results are things like people not being able to pay all of this debt because, they're so, I think that when you're talking about those effects, you have to look at the whole picture and who's benefiting from it. And it's not that many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we can tee up one more question, we actually have time for one more before we wrap us up. If there's one more to pose.
If I could just add one thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
We're talking about like government and like what, government is supposed to be doing, how well government are supposed to do the things they do. I think that we have to treat government as if they are a business, right? So you hire and fire accordingly. You show up to the polls to hire them. You do, a 2-year evaluation or a 4-year evaluation or 6-year evaluation, say this person did not do what they say that they were going to do, and we're going to vote them out of office. So you're fired, right? I think like, I feel like that's like the only language Americans speak, right? Is like business, right? So if you treat these elected officials as, employees, because essentially they're supposed to work for us and do what's in the best interest of us. Then we have to show that we're engaged. Democracy is a do. I say that again to my students, democracy is a do, and it works for the people that are engaged all the time. It is. And so I know it's tiring. I'm tired too. This election cycle almost took me out. Okay. Like it almost took me out, but it's necessary. It's always a do. I don't know how to, politics are not entertaining. It's not entertainment, like Rob, said earlier. This is not, who does the best, who has the best personality. We're talking about competence here. And so we have to always keep that in mind when we're talking about elected officials, up and down, right? Our mayors, our city council members, all the way up to the president, right? So I want to just drive that point in.
Absolutely. Let's ask this one last question from our audience, and then I'll wrap us up. How high is tax overhaul on the new administration's agenda?
I don't think.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, I don't think it's terribly high, and I think the reason is it's a no-win solution. I think that with the coronavirus, lasting impacts of that, we have to kind of see where stuff shakes out. And I don't think that tax policy is an issue that's going to get a lot. It's not a sexy issue. It's not going to get a lot of attention. It's certainly in the president's first year in office.
Absolutely. And Jackson, go ahead.
I was just going to say what I know about his plans for tax overhaul is just repealing, other than repealing the tax cuts that Trump set. I don't know what else is on the table. So yeah, like Rob said, I don't think that's really going to be on the forefront for quite some time. Coronavirus and dealing with that will continue to be. But I will say that his plan to take away the Trump tax cuts, he's not putting them back as high as they were. So you know what I'm saying? But that's a whole nother conversation.
Well, you guys, that is actually all we have time for tonight. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, as well as from the whole Politiscope team. Jay, you already know because you're part of the team, but thank you so much for providing us with your time and your insights. You guys did an incredible job. These conversations are so necessary and so important. And again, I want to stress, if you took anything away from today's conversation, it's to get involved, be engaged, get informed, be empowered with the political process at the state and local level. And also with that, download the Politiscope app.
Yes.
It is available on all Apple and Android platforms. And there are some amazing new learning capabilities that are coming down the pipeline. Also, be sure to follow us at Politiscope app. We also have Clubhouse conversations every Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern. Please be sure to tune into those. Super engaging, all about politics, and great conversation there. If you do believe in our platform, in our mission, we are currently fundraising. And if you'd like to learn more about getting engaged with us, you can reach out to us at info@politiscope.io. Thank you guys for joining us tonight, and I hope everyone has an incredible evening. Peace and love.